I'm going to be giving you some digital art tips for beginners, and I'm also going to be talking about my process along with it. I did try filming this video where I first just talked about my entire digital art process and then I gave you a couple tips, but I realized that that's not really gonna work because my process isn't like super original or anything. It's nothing too different from what anybody else does. I don't have like some secret magic potion that I pour into the mix and then it, bam, creates pretty art or anything. So I didn't really have anything to say. I was just like, yeah, so I draw and then I color and then I draw some more and then done. So I didn't really have anything to say. So instead I wrote down the things that I think are important when you're just starting out digital art. So let's get into color schemes. I think color palettes are pretty important. Obviously color is very complicated. Color theory in general is like really difficult and I'm not the best at it. I do still think I have a lot to learn when it comes to color theory and just colors in general and using them with purpose. These are some of my favorite color combinations and color palettes that I like to use. Having like really pretty cohesive color schemes can make your feed look really nice and also your art look recognizable if you're trying to have like a social media presence, but it's not very important, I don't think. Obviously, you will naturally gravitate towards some colors more than others, but I don't recommend you put yourself in a box. I recommend that you play around with which color schemes you like and which colors you like to use and which ones you think look good together. It is mostly about personal preference. But yeah, like I said, these are some of my favorites to use, and I recommend that you look at what other artists do and what color schemes you gravitate towards, and I don't know, see how other artists that inspire you pair colors together and use them, and eventually you'll get somewhere, I think. Okay, I don't really have much else to say about colors, so let's get to shortcuts. Shortcuts are very important, so please use them. As much as you might think that they're not going to make too much of a difference, surprisingly shortcuts help a lot. In the moment, it only saves you like, what, 2 seconds instead of going with your pen and clicking undo on your keyboard or on your tablet buttons. Surprisingly, but if you use shortcuts, that time will significantly decrease and it'll just make your process a lot easier. So find the shortcut keys settings on your program and like adjust them to your liking. Some of the more basic shortcuts are Control-Z. This one is crucial. If you don't use Control-Z, if you don't have it like set up on your tablet buttons or something, like it just saves so much time being able to click Control-Z instead of going to the undo button. And especially you can just spam it, especially when you're doing line art. It's so helpful. Control-T, which is just a transform tool. If you make a mistake or need to move things around, it's a lot easier to just use transform. Make sure to figure out which button means flip in your program. It is, for me, it's the down arrow key, and every time I press it, my canvas flips horizontally, or is it that way? I'm going to talk a bit more about why flipping your canvas is so important later. Make sure you have this key accessible to you because it is crucial and it's a lot easier than like going in the settings and figuring out and trying to find the whole flip canvas thing. And of course the tool drop, for me it's just the right click and I have it set to my stylus. This little button, when I press it, it just color picks and it's very easy. If I'm just drawing and I need to like blend something or shade or whatever, I can just click the little button and it's very easy. Obviously, it depends on your personal preferences and it takes some time getting used to shortcuts, but I recommend that you get in the habit of using them because genuinely it saves quite a bit of time. Experiment with which ones you personally like. These are the shortcuts I have set up on my keys. Control-S is also a pretty important one, I think, because you need to save your program and having that be quick and like one button makes you get in the habit of saving more frequently, and that way your chance of losing your entire drawing is way less, although it's never 0. So we don't talk about the many tears that have been shed from my program crashing and me forgetting to save. So alright, let's move on to brushes. So the biggest tip I can give you when it comes to brushes is to just experiment, especially if you're working in a new drawing program that you've never used before. Just take some time out of your day to sit down, open a brand new file, and just play around with all the brushes. Just test all of them out. Obviously, in most programs, you can download new ones or buy brush sets. And on MediBang, which is the program I use, you can make your own little custom brushes, and I'm pretty sure it's like that for others too. For example, I have this little Mad Cat brush and this Mad Cat pattern brush, and I also made this star brush when I was making Liam's pajama bottoms because I didn't feel like drawing every star individually. I recommend that you maybe play around with that feature as well, because for example, if you want to make a mountain brush and you don't want to like redraw the same mountain every time, you can do that. Or like grass or textures, you can make your own textures and then make a brush out of it, and then you can use it. You have your custom texture. It's cool. Make sure you test out all the brushes, figure out which ones work for you. Some of my favorite brushes are probably the pen brush. It's literally the first brush in MediBang. It's just a regular pen, nothing special. I can use it for sketching, line art, coloring, literally anything. The G pen and the mapping pen are pretty cool, especially the G pen. If I want like a more textured line art look, I'll use that one. The edge pen is really useful. I'm pretty sure most programs have a pen like the edge pen. It might not be called that. It basically has like an outline to it, so it's really useful for making shoelaces or headphones or any like wires or long cords or lines. It's cool. The watercolor brushes are very useful for like coloring and blending. I probably use those for that the most, or when I'm digitally painting. I also duplicated the regular watercolor brush and made my own version that is kind of like harder. It isn't as like blendy, I guess. You can still use it to mix colors, like it reactivates the color underneath. Obviously, everyone needs an airbrush once in a while, or like the blur one, or like a smudge, but I don't really use them too often. There are plenty more brushes on MediBang that have fun textures, but realistically, I haven't really experimented with many of them. I should probably take my own advice and figure those out, because I'm pretty sure there's like some other fun watercolor brushes that I downloaded not too long ago. There's like a speech bubble brush and a lightning brush. I don't know. I think I could probably get some interesting uses out of most of these for interesting like textures and stuff, especially when I'm painting. One brush that I use very often for sketching and for line art is the No Name brush. That's just like the default name that it gives it, No Name, all caps, when you create a new brush. So it's a custom brush. I'm gonna put up the settings on screens. The thing with this one is it practically has like not that much line art variation. It doesn't taper at the end. There's no opacity change, and something about it makes it easier for me to sketch. I don't know why, but sometimes when I can't really draw or I'm having kind of art block, I'll use this brush to sketch and it makes it a little bit easier. And I'll use it for line art to give off like a cool look. For example, with this drawing, I'm pretty sure I used the No Name brush, and it gives off an interesting look. Like, it's obviously not for everyone and it won't work with every drawing, but it's kind of cool, right? The thick line art. I don't know. Now, I feel like a lot of different people have given a lot of different advice when it comes to sketching, especially digitally. And realistically, I can't really tell you how to sketch. If it works for you, it works for you. We all have our weird little techniques. But there is some like general advice that I can give when it comes to sketching. If you are just starting out, I don't recommend you sketch digitally. Even to this day, I feel more free just sketching in my sketchbook than importing the sketch digitally. It just feels like less pressure, because like if you're drawing on that canvas, you know, it's like this is the canvas, right? This is the drawing, so this is gonna be the sketch. And I don't know, I guess maybe the pressure might have some impact. In your sketchbook, you feel a little more free. Also, something about like holding the pencil and drawing on a physical piece of paper, it's easier to sketch. I don't know. I also end up sketching a lot quicker in my sketchbook. When sketching digitally, I do recommend that you use a lot of layers, especially if you are kind of going in blind and you haven't really done too many thumbnail sketches. Start lightly with a very big flowy brush and use a lot of big strokes, and then slowly chisel away at it, adding more and more layers. A messy sketch isn't too much of a problem. I used to be a very messy sketcher. I recommend that you go in with a second sketch layer at least to like refine it a little bit, so then that way you can use that as your guide to doing the line art. A lot of beginner artists, and this also applies to traditional art, sketch kind of cautiously almost, doing one little line at a time and getting the whole hairy effect. Your lines look kind of fuzzy almost, and your drawing ends up being a lot more stiff. Obviously, line confidence is a very difficult skill to build, and especially the more comfortable you get drawing a specific subject, the more confident your lines will be. I recommend that you use your entire elbow to move, not just your wrist, especially if you're drawing on a bigger surface, like on a big canvas. And try to be more confident and use very long and flowy lines instead of short little ones to create like a long surface, right? Especially when you're drawing digitally, it's not a problem to be making very confident strokes, especially when you're doing line art. Those confident strokes need to be very long and flowy and smooth, and then you can like touch them up, refine them, transform them to your liking. We're gonna go back to the whole flipping your canvas thing. While you're sketching is probably the most important time to flip your canvas. In case you didn't know, flipping your canvas helps you see the mistakes and little details that you can't really notice in its normal format, I guess. When you flip the canvas, you see it from a completely different perspective, and you see that the eye is a little wonky, the head is too big, the nose is in a weird position. Use guidelines. When you get used to drawing something like the same face and the same angle, obviously those guidelines won't really have too much of an effect at that point. If you're drawing something completely new that you've never drawn before, using simple shapes and guidelines will help way more compared to just like you drawing another girl in the same 3/4 view. And just flip your canvas. Again, I have it as like the second button on my tablet. That way it's like super accessible to me and I can click it as many times as I want. Try drawing while the canvas is flipped a bit, you know, kind of alternating between both of them. I used to like almost never flip my canvas. I didn't even know how at one point. But when you find the setting and then you edit as a shortcut, it helps. It helps a lot. Another tip for sketching is zoom out. It's very easy to get caught up on the details and stay zoomed in on your canvas for long periods of time. But we all know that doesn't really lead to the best proportions. I'm guilty of that too. But I have gone into, I wouldn't say a great habit, but I wouldn't say a bad habit either. I zoom in and out quite a lot. The little navigator in the corner, you know, I use that to like move around my canvas all the time, and I'm constantly zooming in, zooming out, moving around. I think it's almost a way for me to like kind of stop and look at my drawing. It's kind of become a habit at this point. It's so annoying in speed paints when it's all sped up and you just go zoom in, zoom out like super quickly. I swear I will get dizzy watching my speed paints, but it's worth it. That way you kind of, you know, can zoom in to do all the details, but then you have to zoom out so then you can see the finished picture. You know, you can see the full thing and how it works together and the whole composition, and you make sure that one eye isn't like way smaller than the other. So yeah, zoom in and out. I don't know. Next up, line art. Now, line art isn't a crucial part. Obviously, some people go full on realistic, others do like a very clean lineless style. You know, you might like rendering your pieces, making a whole painterly digital rendered version of your work. I am more comfortable doing line art rather than like rendering and painting my drawings. Not because line art is easy or anything, I just don't have the patience to sit there rendering something for hours and hours. Once in a while I'll dabble in digital painting, but if I'm gonna paint, I'm gonna paint traditionally, just because like it's so much more fun, like mixing all the paints and using the paintbrush, and it gets so messy, but like in the best way. But I recommend you experiment with how you do things. But when it comes to line art, even if you don't do it very often, when you do, I know it's very difficult, and I know lines can be very wobbly, so my biggest tip for line art is to use stabilizer. Most programs have it, I'm pretty sure, at the top of the screen or something. I have it turned on. At one point it was like at 7. I'm pretty sure now it's at 12. But turn that on. It will make a huge difference, and your lines will be a lot smoother. Don't turn it on all the way though, since your lines are almost too smooth. Like, it doesn't really follow your pen, and your tablet kind of slows down a bit. So I recommend that you have it like somewhere in between. But if you test it out with and without the stabilizer, you can see that there's a huge difference, and it's easier to draw that way, especially when you're doing line. Again, I will give you the same advice when it comes to sketching. Make long, confident lines and strokes, and then touch them up and change them if you need. But don't put too much pressure on making the line art too clean, and try adding more interesting line variation. Alright, time for coloring and shading. This is my favorite part of any drawing, whether that's traditionally or digitally. Sketching can be fun and everything, but I genuinely really love coloring. It kind of brings the whole drawing to life, and no matter how like detailed you color it or render it or whatever, it's still gonna be fun in my opinion. First, I'm gonna give you a couple tips, and then I'm gonna show you how I color, kind of. Again, it's difficult to explain a process because I don't really have like a specific thing I do every time. It changes depending on the drawing, obviously, and my steps aren't too different from anybody else's, but I'll show you at least like the layers that I use and stuff. Use clipping masks. They help a lot. If you don't know what a clipping mask is, basically make a layer above your base color and check off the little clipping mask thingy. Then you're gonna see there's like a little arrow to it pointing down to the layer below it. And what this does is every time you draw on that layer, the one that's like a clipping mask, basically it only draws inside the already colored thing that you have underneath it, if that makes sense. Like if I have this circle here and I use a clipping mask and then color over top on that layer, then it's only going to appear where the circle is, right? If I extend the circle, then that's also going to extend, if you see what I mean. If you want to add shading and you don't want to go outside the lines, this helps tremendously. I don't know what I would do without clipping masks. It would probably be very messy, especially if you're painting. Clipping masks are gonna save your life. I don't know what I would do without them, honestly, especially if you want to like change a color or something and you don't want to like mess with the hue settings. The easiest way is just to just use the fill bucket and a clipping mask, and bam, you change the color. Another thing that I think you should experiment with are the layer blending modes. There's a bunch of different modes in most programs, and I don't really know what all of them do, but I recommend that you just take some time out of your day and like see what all of them are about. The ones I use the most are probably multiply, overlay, and maybe like add or divide. Add and divide I usually use for glowing effects, and overlay for adding textures, and multiply for shading if you want like simple, clean, quick shading without putting too much effort into it. Alright, so now on to my coloring and shading process. Alright, since filming that video, my process has actually changed a little bit, and I explained it really poorly, so let me just give you a little quick rundown. After I do line art, I make a layer below and I start coloring. I make a separate layer for each color, so like the shirt, the hair, the skin, they will all be their own layer instead of just having like one base color layer. This helps, that way I can separately add clipping masks to each item, I guess, and shade it individually. I do end up with a lot of layers this way, but it helps and it just keeps me more organized. I also have the line art on different layers, so I'll first do line art of the body and then the hair and then the face on like a different layer. I don't know why, mostly because then when I'm coloring the line art, it makes it a lot easier. I don't need to be careful with it. All I have to do is just like fill bucket tool it with a clipping mask. So I separate everything. That does mean I end up with a lot of layers, but it helps me personally. Then once I've done the base colors, I add a bunch of clipping masks and shade everything. I don't do too complicated shading, but I go right to the top, make a layer above all the line art, and I render the hair. I've started doing this more. I don't know if this is gonna last. I might switch back to my old little method, and my process changes quite a bit. Even a month ago was very different, but I render the hair, and then afterwards maybe I just like do a couple details, maybe fix the line art. I don't know, it's mostly just like me winging it and doing whatever I think fits the illustration. I add like a background or something. I've started first thinking of a background and then drawing the illustration, and by background I mean like a circle or a square or something, but it's good enough. And then afterwards, the most fun part are the doodles. I started doing this quite a while ago, where I'll add little doodles and stars and hearts in the background to like fill space and also just looks cuter, and it makes my illustrations a lot more interesting. But now I've like gone all the way. I make all the doodles super colorful, and like I just think it looks so much better, and it makes me so freaking happy making art like this. It literally is how I would do my sketchbook pages, and I've started to like kind of use that mentality into my art and just like, you know what, whatever, I'm gonna have fun, and I'm having fun. So I've started doing a lot of doodles and things. After I'm done with the entire illustration though, sometimes if it does need a little bit more spice, I'll add some green, but most of the time I just add a nice little orange overlay at the top and make it everything like super warm. Usually I only set it at like 10% opacity or something, sometimes even lower, sometimes a little higher, but usually around there, and it just ties in the colors a little bit more. If I don't think it needs it, then I won't do it. If there's some intense lighting, then I add like a bunch of other layers and stuff for the lighting, but that's practically it. I had like highlights and little doodles and little finishing touches, but that's my entire coloring process. It's nothing special, it's nothing different, but I hope that helps. I don't think it does, but have fun. Yeah, no, that's my tip. Have fun. Now, the biggest like shading tip I can give is, you know, the classic, don't use black and an airbrush to shade. I'm sure we've all heard that one before. Obviously, you can use black in your art if you're going for like a black and white drawing, or if you want very stark contrast. I'm not gonna stop you from using black. I do not recommend you shade with black with an airbrush though. Probably is gonna look kind of muddy and ugly, but if you want to do it, I'm not gonna stop you. Again, if I want to make something black, I'll make it like a dark brown, blue, or purple, just a darker version of any color. It's like very close to black, but it's not quite black. It works better. You can even just do like dark gray. But when it comes to actually shading, let's say we have this orange circle, right? And you want to shade it. Now you could use just a darker version of the orange to shade, but it's gonna look kind of dull, kind of boring. Instead, what I do, and what a lot of other people do, you take the color, make it darker, and then move it slightly on either side of the color wheel. My color wheel is a color line. I don't know if I can actually make it a color wheel. I do like the way a color wheel looks more than a color block, but I don't know if MediBang has that setting. I either move it up or down. I either make the color slightly cooler or slightly warmer, and I use that to shade. So for example, with that orange circle, I will use a darker, redder color. I always am a little bit concerned that whatever I say, you will all be like, oh yeah, I already knew that. I already knew every single thing that you talk about in this video, so this is the most boring thing ever. But I'm trying to put in effort here. Maybe, you know, some of you are just starting digital art and have never heard any of these tips before. I don't know. Most of the time, if I am making videos like these, I'm compiling information that I've learned over the years from personal experience, and also just like what other artists have said online. You shouldn't trust every piece of advice that people give you. Try it out, see if it works for yourself. And again, that also goes for me. I'm not a professional. I feel like I should have put a disclaimer. I'm probably gonna put a disclaimer in the beginning of the video. I'm not a professional. Like, maybe I'll come back in a year and be like, everything I said was not true. She was an idiot back then. Don't listen to her. But the lack of confidence maybe shows a little bit of, you know, lack of confidence, I guess. Whatever. Lastly, I'm just gonna give you some advice on equipment and stuff, and then just general advice, I guess. You do not need a fancy tablet to make digital art. At first, I started off with my phone. I was lucky enough for my parents to be able to buy me a tablet in the first place, and then let me upgrade to a better tablet. But you don't need to spend a ton of money to have like really good equipment. You can easily just like, if you have like a tablet already, like a regular tablet, not a drawing one, you can just buy one of those like little styluses that are like for the tablet or for a phone, and just use your phone, download like IBS Paint. I don't know, I'm just gonna say IBS Paint. Or some other mobile and then screenless tablets, the one where you plug it into your computer or laptop, or even like phone. Those work great. I used mine for a couple years. I'm emotionally attached to it because that's how I started. That's where I first got into digital art I cannot say digital art. I am making this entire video about digital art. Digital art. It sounds so weird. Digital art. But if I say digital, then I'm over pronouncing it. But digital. But I can't go digital art. Because then I'm like digital. Like what? Ooh, how do you say it? How do you say digital art? Digital. Sorry, that is such a pet peeve of mine. The fact that I cannot say it. Ugh. Anyway, as I was saying, you don't need a big fancy tablet. After a couple years, if you decide that you actually like this and you want to upgrade, and you can, you don't need to you don't need to spend a bunch of money. It's okay. You can there are plenty of good affordable tablets. But if you're not quite sure if you even like digital art, and if you're even going to be into it, again, just start on your phone. It's not going to be the same, obviously, but don't spend too much money. You can get an iPad, I guess, but they're pretty expensive. Procreate, again, I wouldn't recommend paying for like Photoshop or Procreate, because if you don't enjoy it, if you don't like the program, then it's going to be a waste of money. So yeah, you don't need a bunch of fancy stuff. And that goes for any art medium, but sadly tablets are expensive. Lastly, just wanted to tell you to be patient and practice. Obviously that is the most basic advice ever. So much at the tip of your the tip of your fingertips, at the your finger. There's a lot on the internet. That's what I'm trying to say. And just keep at it, and go make some art. Go be creative, because it's fun. So yeah, I hope you found any of these tips helpful. Again, very concerned that every single one of you are already know everything, but I mean, if you're clicking on this video, you probably, you know, need some guidance, possibly, maybe. So yeah, I will see you in my next video. Probably won't be another tutorial because, oh my god, I'm tired. Bye!